Welcome to the Faithful Fireside podcast.
Yeah, so Kevin has an announcement.
Yeah, so we no longer use Patreon for our paid access tier of things. So now all of our paid stuff is through Substack. If you want to, anyone can subscribe to our Substack for free, and you'll see all of our posts. And then there's a separate paid tier. It's $5 a month.
Yep.
You get access to paid-only posts, and then also our book club, in which we had our first session last night. We covered The Pearl by Steinbeck. So
it was super great, super fun. Shout out to Jordan Kelly and Christian Sager.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Sager, who's a new friend to me, but it was cool to spend time together. And the people who get to participate in the book club get the opportunity to shape the content and what we do going forward, which is really kind of cool. So the ideas that we share there may turn into essays, or, if we have a book club meeting and you want to write an essay, you can contribute and we'll post, your work to get it out there for people.
Mm-hmm.
So really cool.
It was good. It lasted about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good session.
Yeah, and I think we're still kind of thinking about what to do for the next one, so be on the lookout for that announcement. But my guess is it'll be, if it's up to me, we'll do Liturgies of the Wild, but that might give me 2 in a row, and Kevin and I are supposed to bounce back and forth, so we'll talk about what we want to do next.
Yeah, we'll figure that out soon.
And then we'll announce that.
We also were doing a thing for the first 10 paid subscribers get a free mug that has a Faithful Fireside on it. We don't have them in yet, but they're similar to this style of campfire mug.
Yeah.
So first 10 will get mugs. So we've already gotten 3 paid subscribers. So 7 spots left.
Yeah. 7 spots left for mugs, which would be cool.
And part of our paid subscription as well, if you're a monthly member, you get auto-enrolled into our monthly merch giveaway. So
nice. Yeah, so that'll be really cool.
Yeah, once we start getting stuff in, we'll start that in March. So.
Yeah, nice. So we're recording this a little early, but this is going to air, and we'll be talking about, this should be like second week of Lent. And so we're going to do a Bible study, which is hilarious because I'm this Bible guy who has all these opinions on great Bibles, but we weren't going to be able to record today because of work conflict, and that turned out not to be a conflict. So I'm here to record, and I don't have a Bible. So I'm going to use this phone. So I'm ashamed of myself because of that. But also it was a change of plans. So like last minute we thought, hey, we can get an episode in. Yeah. So let's try and get that in instead of lose a whole recording day. So, lo and behold, here we are.
What's it start with? What's your reading?
So we are, of course, Lectionary cycle A this year. So that, the Lectionary in the Catholic Church has
3 cycles?
A, B, and C. Yeah. Yep. And then if you are doing all the readings,
not so cradle.
Hey, that's not bad. If you do something that, maybe a lot of cradle Catholics don't know, that most converts have had to encounter, is you have like a 3-year cycle. So if you do A, B, and C, and you do all of the readings, you'll have read like 70+% of the Bible in 3 years in and
that's just from the Saturday or Sunday readings, right? Not counting the every.
That's the weekday readings too. Yeah, that is the daily readings too. So you have to read everything to get that benefit. But it doesn't require that much effort. You can go through the Bible pretty much all of it, once every 3 years that way. So a little bit more effort, go from like 3, 4, 5 minutes a day to like 10 to 15 minutes a day. Then you read the Bible in a year.
Father Mike, Bible in a Year podcast, good stuff.
Yeah, Bible in a Year.
I'm on day 250, so I'm almost there.
Nice. So. Yeah. Don't feel bad if you can't keep up. Because, if you're going to go that 10 to 15 minutes worth of reading and then Father Mike is going to help you understand it, it's a 30-minute-a-day commitment to do that. But if it takes you 2 years to get through the Bible in a year, then by all means you should do that.
I've been doing it for a year, but usually I only get an episode in like 4 days a week.
Yeah. It's
no,
definitely
worth
it.
It's been good. So we're starting out with Leviticus?
No, we're actually going to be
Oh.
in Genesis. In Genesis, yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Leviticus.
No. I mean, I'm telling you what, for a guy who loves myth and fairy story and liturgy, Leviticus is actually one of the most interesting books in the Bible. But if you're not that degree of nerd, Genesis is where it's
I
at.
thought Leviticus is brutal.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of folks who get Leviticus and then First and Second Chronicles.
Okay.
For a lot of people are brutal. They just I'll just read Samuel and the Kings because Chronicles is a sort of retelling of Kings.
That's right.
That most folks would say is later and than Kings is.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Genesis what?
we're going to be Genesis 12, 1 through 4a. Okay, and for those of you who are new to Bible study, if you have like letters, 1 through 4a is typically like the first sentence or the first major clause of 4. So this is the end of, we're gotten past the prehistory. The first 11 chapters of Genesis are prehistory. Those are mythic tellings. And when I say mythic, don't get offended because I don't mean not real. I mean they're foundational tellings of how we came to be and this present world we live in is the way that it is. And then 12, we're going to take that mythic scope, zoom in on Abram, who will be Abraham. And so we're now scoping in on the foundation of the promise and the covenant of God's action to a more particular people instead of the covenant with Noah, which is just all survivors of the flood largely. We'll talk about giants and stuff later and the flood and the Old Testament, the wars and stuff that happen upon the people that are in the promised land and what giants have to do with that. And that's that's not what we're talking about with Abram. That's sort of a little bit more foundational in terms of the mythic scope. And then it comes up again in Joshua.
Yeah.
But for this story...
Don't forget the cameras there.
Yeah, I keep looking over here because I can see us over here. Yeah, the camera's right here. Hello, people. Sorry. I don't know why. Can you just put the camera over there? Then the shot's terrible.
The laptop behind it.
Yeah. But anyway, so you guys are here. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to do Genesis 12, 1 through 4a. Okay, so I'll read that. All right. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from the land of your kinsfolk and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. All the communities of the earth shall find blessing in you." Abraham went as the Lord directed him. Okay, so this is actually the starting of Abram's story at this point. So he's leaving his land, which would be like Chaldea or Babylonia. It's off towards, where we would think of as like the Babylon region, and he's going to make a journey west. And so God is calling him out from that area to make him a different people, and this will eventually be the Hebrews. Then they will eventually settle in Israel. Okay, so that's the start of this journey. And I think the big thing, when we read our readings as Catholics, we'll have 4 readings, and this reminds me of, I don't know if you spent any time with like Monsignor Novak, but I got to listen to a talk that he gave. I haven't spent time with him one-on-one yet either, and it makes me sad, but I definitely am looking forward to a time when we can do that. But we have... I was at a talk for RE, religious education. One of my daughters is going through First Communion. And so he gave a talk kind of about that. And he had a great joke that it was just discussing, hey, we're Catholics and we always get made fun of for not reading the Bible. But that's not true. Okay? Because when you go to Mass, we have 4 Bible readings every time. It's just you may not even notice that it's happening if you're not paying attention, right? But there's like 4 different readings, and so this is just the first one. Okay, so there's a big, as we go through Catholic readings, we have to make the connection from the first reading to the second reading to the third reading to the fourth reading. Why are all of these different things the ones that are chosen? So at the end, we'll kind of make that connection.
Okay.
But that's our Old Testament reading, is Abraham accepting the mission that God's giving him. So he's stepping out of he's about to go on an initiation quest, really. He's stepping out from his father's family, and he's going to go become his own people with his own story on his own journey, and there's going to be lots of harrowing things that occur. And this is just that acceptance of that call. Do you have anything you want to add or any stories related to this? Okay, so this is just sort of, for us, it's an event that doesn't necessarily happen to us as much in our culture. That, there's not a lot of calling out. There's not like this initiation rite, we just sort of like are entertained up until death, but this is very different. Okay. So Abraham is our Old Testament reading, the start of that. So then the second reading that we have is a psalm. And the psalm readings are going to be broken up into sections, and that's because we read them or chant them. So that's why, folks may not think of it as a reading, but it is a reading. So Psalm 33, and the verses that are pulled are 4 and 5, 18 and 19, and then 20 and 22. Okay, so I've got that collected here.
The 33?
Yep, Psalm 33.
Okay.
And so then our job is to start trying to think, why this psalm? Why is this the psalm, the song that we sing as a church that is going to connect all this stuff?
Right.
So, Lord, let your mercy be on us as we place our trust in you. Upright is the word of the Lord, and all his works are trustworthy. He loves justice and right. Of the kindness of the Lord, the earth is full. Lord, let your mercy be on us as we place our trust in you. See, the eyes of the Lord are upon those who fear him, upon those who hope for his kindness, to deliver them from death and preserve them in spite of famine. Lord, let your mercy be on us as we place our trust in you. Our soul waits for the Lord, who is our help and our shield. May your kindness, O Lord, be upon us, who have put our hope in you. Lord, let your mercy be on us as we place our trust in you. And I think the connection is probably fairly simple, right? Abraham, trusting in God, sets out on a journey. God be my shield on the journey, right? Your works are trustworthy, you're good and kind. And that's something that we fail a lot, and this to do with prayer, right? Like the psalm is a song, the psalm is a sung prayer, it's like a hymn. Very important throughout the history of Christianity. Like, why is there 50 Hail Marys, and the evolution of the Rosary is like Mary's Psalter, because you would do 150 Hail Marys instead of the 150 Psalms that the people in religious life would do, right? So the Rosary becomes this source of popular piety because we are singing Mary's Psalter, and it was something that you could have memorized, and if you couldn't read, you could do that instead of 150 Psalms. So then if you do the Liturgy of the Hours, which is the church's prayer, and that is, we talked about prayer, Mass being like the nuclear bomb of prayer in book club. Mm-hmm. But you also have the idea of the Liturgy of the Hours being the public-facing prayer of the church, and if you do that, you actually will pray through all 150 Psalms. That's where we do that. But that's really, it's hard, and people find it difficult, and so there's this devotion of the Rosary or Mary's Psalter. So 150 always becomes an important number, even though there may not actually be 150 Psalms, but we're not going to talk about that. So there's that's a teaser, okay? That's a special thing. If you want that, let me know in the comments. But that's sort of this idea of 150 being really important, and then we then kind of incorporate that into the Mass and make that part of our sung worship. So Abraham sets out.
What reading's next?
The second reading is our New Testament reading. So that's 2 Timothy 1, 8b through 10. So the second part of verse 8 into 10. 2 Timothy. So we're getting into Most of the time, the second reading is going to be like a Pauline reading. It's usually Paul, but it will just be like a New Testament letter. Sometimes it's Acts. It could be.
Second Timothy, what? Sorry.
That's all right. 1:8.
Okay.
Second part of that through 10.
Okay.
All right. So, beloved, bear your share of hardship for the gospel with the strength that comes from God. He saved us and called us to a holy life, not according to our works, but according to his own design and the grace bestowed on us in Christ Jesus before time began, but now made manifest through the appearance of our Savior Christ Jesus, who destroyed death and brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. So Paul is, that second reading sometimes will be the joiner from the old to the new, right? Like the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul, and I'm going to just say Paul again for simplicity, for scholarly type things, hit me up in the chat later. But the idea is bear your hardship for the sake of the gospel. Abraham's going to go on this journey and suffer lots of hardship. So the Psalm's about that, this about that protection, and then the reading's about that. He's going to get strength from God. He's called to a holy life. He's called out of more of a pagan existence in Chaldea, right? Or from this Babylonian type of existence. He gets called out for something special. The grace of Christ is bestowed and Christ is made manifest. Okay, so here's your big key word. We're going to switch from this manifestation of Christ into the Transfiguration, which is going to be our gospel reading, which is like this manifest par excellence of Christ. Okay, so we're getting that brought together, Christ who destroyed death and brought life and immortality through the light. All right, so light's going to be big and key for the Transfiguration of the gospel. So we're sort of bridging that old reading, the Old Testament reading or the Hebrew Bible reading into the New Testament reading, into the gospel proper.
Okay.
Now then, during Lent, we don't sing the Alleluia. So the Alleluia is usually a third verse pulled somewhere from Scripture that we read, right? We'll sing Alleluia, there'll be something said, and we'll do Alleluia again. This is the third reading, though no Alleluia. It's a penitential time. We kind of bury the Alleluia. And in fact, there's a tradition that some people will do is they'll actually take anything that says Alleluia or the Alleluia sign in their house, or they will go buy one and they'll go out in the yard and bury it. Because during Lent, we're not saying that, right? So it's also like the idea of not singing the Gloria, right? There's this time where we're waiting for that, we're preparing for that to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have like the bells and the liturgies and the lights at Easter Vigil, and we kind of really hit that,
Yeah.
So this is just called verse before the gospel at this point, instead of the Alleluia, which is Matthew 17.
Okay.
Verse 5, and so oftentimes it will be something from the gospel reading, or very, very closely tied to it. So let me know when you're ready for that. Moving on to reading number 3.
Matthew, what did you say?
17, verse 5. Yeah, Matthew 17, verse 5.
Yeah, next time we'll be better prepared and have them all bookmarked.
That makes sense. I mean, it's like I said, this is ad hoc. We didn't think we were going to get to do this today.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, Matthew 17, verse 5. From the shining cloud, the Father's voice is heard. This is my beloved Son. Hear him. And so that's going to lead us straight into the gospel, so we can go there, right? But you're going to have this connection of sonship for Son of Christ, the Son of God, Son of Man, Abraham being called out to by God's voice, and so there's this sort of sense that Abraham is a son of God. All that's getting kind of tied together. So you have to think about it in terms of symbols, and how those symbols overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to bring us in here to the gospel. All right, so this is Matthew 17, 1 through 9. So you should already be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise, and do not be afraid. And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one else but Jesus alone. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, Do not tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. And that's the gospel of the Lord. Okay. So is there anything that kind of stuck out to you as we did that reading?
I mean, lately it's just been on my mind because I see it on TikTok a lot. There's a lot of reels that really focus on like how many times in the gospel and just in the Bible in general it's like, do not be afraid.
Oh, that's okay. That's a good thing to talk about that.
Yeah.
Preach, Kevin.
No, it's just interesting.
The same thing with like the appearance of angels.
Yeah.
It's like there is sort of that angelic stuff going on here. So the Annunciation, the Lord like overshadows Mary. There's this sense of being impregnated by light that you see depicted in art and pictures and stuff like that too. You have that sort of going on here. The theme of light kind of is one thing that chains all the readings together. The cloud, of course, the voice of God, all that's going on for sure. I think the first thing that I noticed, of course, you have Peter, James, and John. So there's this sense of like Jesus is special. Of the 12, these are these inside guys, even more so. Only they get to see it. And so for Catholics, of course, we stake a claim on Peter as the Prince of the Apostles, receiving the keys. It's always interesting that he's kind of included in that. We could say similar things about James and John. James is sometimes associated with traditionally like the first martyr, and then John is the apostle that doesn't get martyred. He's the one he's like the first and the last in Peter. So there's sort of, and there's more to it than that, but that's like one thing you might think about, like who are these people? And that's something we could do, in a drive-by impromptu Bible study, just leave it at that.
So those 3 are considered like the inner circle of all the apostles.
Right. Okay. That's right. Peter, James, and John. And there's this really interesting sense that John is Christ's foster brother.
Yeah.
Right. He gives his mother to John and from the cross. Right. So there's this really intimate thing that's going on there. And then in the Gospel of John, it's typically the apostle or the disciple that Christ loved is typically thought of as being John, the author of that gospel. And so you have this idea that Christ and John are, foster bosom brothers. There's the idea that like John reclines in Christ's chest, right? Like when they eat, because there's this reclining way that they eat from the table together. Like John is the one who's the closest to him. And then Peter is always prominent in every gospel. There's always something going on. He's usually the one that's depicted as the oaf in a way as well. He'll say something embarrassing, which happens here in a way, right? It's like, I have no idea what's going on, but I can make a tent. And in fact, I'll build 3. All right, we're going to go tent city. So it's like that has nothing. It's sort of like ignored, right? So Peter's sort of the one who he's the man of action, strikes with the sword, cuts off the servant's ear that Christ has to put back on, in one of the Gospels as well. Peter is just that guy. And then James and John, sons of thunder, they're the ones that they're embarrassing to when they argue with each other about like sitting at the right and the left hand of Christ. There's all of that. These figures get there's all these stories that get interleaved and they're connected to this one. And so to go through and review those stories in great detail and bring them back into why these three in this moment is a great exercise, because they have that. All of that stuff should be kind of ringing around in your brain when we go to the Transfiguration and they're there,
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But then there's also geography, which is something that people will skip over. So spiritual geography is really important. Where are we? We're on a high mountain, right? So the Transfiguration can't happen on flat land, and it can't really happen so much in the depths. Like this Transfiguration, if we're going to have a Transfiguration, it's got to be on a mountain. Because in spiritual geography or symbolic geography, you had to go up the mountain to meet God. God comes down in that moment and you go up. So there's always the ascent of the mountain. So ascent of Mount Carmel. So you get the ideas from like John of the Cross, St. John of the Cross. But it's just riddled everywhere. If you're going to have an ascension, we even talk about it that way. It's like I had like an elevated experience of some kind, which is it's just got to be on a mountain, and so that's happening here. So he's going up a mountain. There's going to be other geographical things that you might consider too. It's not in our gospel, but what region they're in, what mountain this might be. This could be a Christ staking a claim on this mountain to reclaim it from other powers and principalities, right? So we're not going to get into that, but I want to kind of just throw that out as a little bit of a teaser. If we want to talk about mountains and locations, we could do a little bit more of an expanded story that includes more, right? Like, what mountain is this? Is a question to ask when we encounter stuff like this. But he's transfigured on the mountain. His face shines like the sun. His clothes are white. When Moses goes up Sinai or Horeb, right, he has the same thing. They veil Moses' face, right, because he's exuding this light. So that's being brought up into this moment. And then, of course, lo and behold, Moses himself appears. And Moses is the representative of the law, the Torah, first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, which is, I use that term as a technical term and a respectful term, but when in Bible college we use the term Hebrew Bible instead of Old Testament. That may actually be less accurate, because if I'm assuming you're reading the Greek version, maybe I should just say Old Testament. But if I say Hebrew Bible, I just mean Old Testament. It's just a thing that I have a habit of saying from that time. So Moses is the Torah, and then there's Elijah. Do you remember any like the stories of Elijah or who Elijah is?
Elijah is closer to the end of the Old Testament, right? Or no?
Closer, yes, because he's going to be, the story of Elijah is in the books of the Kings.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because right now in the Bible in the year, I'm just at the point with Daniel and the lion den. But prior to that was Jeremiah, the weeping prophet.
Yep.
And then Elijah was all before that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So Elijah, kind of like Moses is the prototype lawgiver, Elijah is the prototype prophet. So there is no like grand work that he writes like Jeremiah, but he is the prophet that all other prophets kind of grow from, in a sense, right? So you have Elijah and then Elisha.
Yes.
Right.
There's those close ones. Yeah.
That's right. So he passes on his mantle to Elisha, and then there's this discipline of being a prophet that grows out of that. And then you have the prophets that write, and so then you have like Amos, which this is going to be a shameless plug for the Amos article that I wrote. I have the really long Amos treatment that looks at Amos rural man versus the urban rich. And so that's an article that's on Substack. And that tradition will kind of grow, and then you'll have like the minor prophets that kind of start with Amos, the 8th century prophets, and then there's the major prophets with like Isaiah and Jeremiah and others. Okay. Those are the big books.
Yeah.
So Elijah represents all of that. So you have the law, you have this, maybe even the priest handbook. Leviticus, because Moses sort of bears with him the law, but also his brother is Aaron. And then you have Elijah bringing the prophet. These are these holy archetypes, the men of the myth that lived legend that are being brought into Christ in the moment of the Transfiguration. And so they're the human representatives. And Christ is also man and God. So if you imagine everything again being an X, we did X as a book club last night too. But if you imagine things being an X, you have Moses and Elijah brought up into the center, which is Christ, right? And of course an X is a cross, right? So it's important. It's one of the Christogram symbols of like the chi, the key of Greek is that symbol. Christ is Christos, so his name is brought into it. So that's why I choose X. But then you have like the Spirit and you have God the Father that are involved in this moment as well. There's this overshadowing that's happening. And that overshadowing is often associated with the Spirit. And you have the cloud, right? And God appears as a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire in the Exodus, right? And to guide them. That brings down... those two things come down to Christ and meet. So he's now the center, on top of the mountain, the central figure, the coming together of men and God is epitomized in Christ. It's like the biggest achievement. It's not just the law. It's also the prophets. It's not just man. It's God all in this one figure. So he transfigures into something shining and white and illuminate, something that Moses has for a mere moment. Christ has also in this moment, just briefly, but it's a foretelling, right? The whole event is sort of prophetic. He's like, don't tell until I'm brought up, right? Until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. Because when the Son of Man is raised from the dead, this is permanent, right? This transfiguration is like this glimpse into the glorified body that they get. And then, Peter and the apostles, that they're just sort of dumbstruck. They fall prostrate down on their faces, which is something that we should do more often in the West. We should pray with our bodies. But they fall down and Christ brings them up and he says, do not be afraid, right? Tying back into the angels, because they've seen something of that class. They've seen something that's above the mountain. And in this instance, it's Christ, it's God himself who's reaching down.
So why just those three? Why not the rest?
Something about it being a secret, I think that there's like a special foretelling that these inside folks get as representatives of,
maybe they just feel like the natural leaders of the group, and
so that's definitely that's mentioned, right? Because you do have that being mentioned as like, Peter's the one who gets the keys, and then you have like the sons of thunder, James and John, arguing about like who's going to sit at the left and right hand. So there's some sense that the gospel doesn't just tell you, because this is symbolic storytelling. It's not the way we tell stories now with like the modern realism and internal dialogue, which that came up at book club last night too. But it is presented in such a way that because those questions aren't answered, you have that space to like enter into it experientially. Like why these three is a question you should ask. The only hint that I can give really right now is, this idea of Peter as prince and then James and John being like archetypal martyr, but then John also visionary survivor, the last of the prophet. He's the last of the apostles, right? He lives the longest. So they represent something, and that can be mined out quite a bit, So I give you like that as like a notional starting point, but going into that is a whole nother episode, just the symbolism of Peter, James, and John for sure. Like, who are they? You know, um,
Yeah.
it's a great question for sure. But that's what I think. I'd just give it that and sort of leave it at there.
Cool.
So we then do a Catholic story, like a Catholic Bible, not story, a Catholic Bible study by going through the readings that and how those readings are connected and what we glean from that theologically. And then you might ask yourself, writers had some reasonable interpretations, and I haven't really pulled a lot of specific stuff. That's just from time in Bible college and then time reading the scriptures and things that I've picked up, and that's sort of just this nest of things in my head. So it's not hyper specific. Of course, it's not necessarily meant to be. But if you haven't had these things balled up in your head, or you haven't had these sorts of thoughts and this experience, where would you go first to kind of figure out what's the thread? And of course, there's people you can ask your priest. You can watch Bishop Barron. That you can go to, Father Mike, Jeff Cavins, Scott Hahn, John Bergsma, the guys at the St. Paul Center do really good Bible study material. And Brant Petrie. These are all really good guys who are really good scholars that write really good, like popular level material. But what's even better than that is the saints and the church fathers. So there's one thing that took me too long to learn that I learned from my buddy Brian, who we work with, that we met at work, Brian. He was the one who kind of taught me saints before scholars. Because I was, a Protestant guy, and so we were really involved in, Bible study and critical theory and the stuff that you just do and when you get a Bible degree. But because I was really detached from tradition in any way, and not all Protestant people are, but I was really detached from tradition. I jumped over a lot of that stuff and had kind of the American religion vibes of like superstitious Catholicism and and it was a subconscious prejudice at the time. Like I wasn't like a burn the Catholics people, but it was one of those things where I had received that as part of my civic tradition that I received. So anyway, I just didn't ever really, that didn't cross my mind. I thought the saints were not particularly well informed, or they weren't up to the level of scholarship now that we had post Enlightenment, right? Which I've wholesale rejected that idea. So what you would do now is you would put saints before scholars because the saints are people who knew how to live their faith, but they maybe most importantly for us is they knew how to pray. So the thing about saints is saints are people of prayer. And scholars even...
And also a lot of them had major faults, right? That's why...
Yeah.
That's what made them, I guess, relate with us better, right?
Mm-hmm. Major faults for sure.
Like they weren't perfect people.
No.
But their actions were amazing.
And then they became perfect, right? That's right. That's the idea, is that they go through their sanctification or their theosis, as you might say, in the Eastern Church. But that's this sort of idea that Catherine Siena talks about so well, is that in the dialogue, but there's this real sense that God became man, and in doing that and showing us the way, gave us a way that we might become God. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of other saints that write of this, right? It's becoming this idea of unity, and it's mystical. So anybody who kind of approaches that degree of writing, they're engaging in mysticism, and which we should do an episode on mysticism, because I think that's something that we lack. I don't really see Enlightenment-based critical theory as being super helpful for people and building a life that you can live. It's another postmodern deconstruction, which postmodernists like to deconstruct things, but you have to you have to have a thing that you can live that is sufficiently complex and durable that it can account for all of human experience. Like it can account for your life. And the issue with deconstruction is you don't typically have that at the end. Some people can live like that just okay. I don't think there are a lot of people who live like that well. And all of us have to kind of struggle because we're in that context. But you can go to the saints and you go to the church fathers who were the first theologians on the ground, right? When we say church fathers, and then you could even say there's the desert fathers and the desert mothers. So if you prefer female writers, right, you can go into and the stories of female saints early on. There are a lot of people who flee into the desert and have vivid spiritual experiences like Saint Mary of Egypt. So there's lots of people that you could look at for those sorts of things. And I think I got most of this already, but the church fathers talk about like the Trinitarian Theophany. So Origen talks about that, Holy Spirit being that bright cloud. There's the Father's voice and the Son and the Spirit are all there. So you have this Trinitarian moment in the top part of the X.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Christ's divinity. So Aquinas focuses on this. This is this like kind of pinnacle miracle moment, face shining like the sun, ties in Moses. It's sort of this idea of taking your baptism in the fleshly self, but then you going through this sort of becoming this purest white on the way up in this transfiguration. It's like this liminal moment where you flip from the baptized life you have here, which is about as good as you can do, through the transfiguration into the glorified existence. So this is like a promise for us into what we would become as well, right? Who follow after him. So that's just a couple, but that's what I would do is you do your reading. You read what the readings that are laid out for you liturgically together. You try and find the thread that runs between them all, and then when you are ready to dig deeper, you go to the church fathers and the saints, and you start there. And then there's lots of other scholars. I named several that are trustworthy, faithful scholars that aren't there to try and subvert, subdue, or trick you. They're there to try and help you understand why your faith is reasonable and beautiful and not dumb because they're Karl Barth. They're not Karl Barth. Bart Ehrman is the guy I'm thinking of because they're like this deconstructionist scholars. So saints before scholars, that's what you want to do. Not that you shouldn't read scholars if you're interested, but the saints are the ones that really show us how to live, where scholars have to be published.
Yeah, I've never really thought. I've always heard that term, like saints before scholars, but I've never really thought about it. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
I like it.
That changed. That was one of the things that Brian told me. I'm sure other ones will come up, but that's one of the things that Brian told me really changed my life forever. The other one was that sola scriptura didn't really make sense because I'd never thought about it. I just always accepted it.
Yeah.
Which is another topic for sure, because you cannot reach the end of a Bible study. That's the thing. This will never be exhausted.
Yeah.
It's a source of spiritual resource. It's like a gold mine, so to speak, and there is no end. But that's why the stories have to be written like this. The way that we write now, there's always like if you don't use a parable or the gospel format, there is a right answer, and then there are wrong interpretations that people are able to assign a meaning to. But there's only a certain range of interpretations that kind of fall where like author intent and what you receive align sufficiently that there's real meaning there. You can't just read whatever you want out of something that's written. This opens up the aperture for that kind of thing very, very wide. And there's a lot to be gleaned here. And the images are just like unmineable. You can't finish it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I go about doing a Bible study,
Cool.
I guess. So that's sort of what we were doing, is doing a Bible study that would help you along in the second week of Lent. But this is how Ryder looks at stuff and builds his things out.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do more of these. A little bit more planned out, but
Yeah, this was totally ad hoc. So
I think it was good. I enjoyed it.
it was fun. I mean, there's not really a lot better you can do with your time, for sure. And I do get really, it's a little irritating when people talk about the Bible being like simple and easy to understand, right? Which is the underlying assumption of my original background, like the Christian background I came from, because which is sometimes called Campbellism. But the idea is that it's not really true that I can read the Bible and get the true depths of it without a lot of study. And it's just because like I mentioned, sacred geography and the ideas of like mountains being up. That's not something that your average bear just picks up on, because it doesn't plainly say that anywhere, right? You have to know that. You have to be able to read symbols to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to kind of take a moment and share some of these things behind, kind of pull the curtain back, I guess, just a little bit and say, here's certain stuff in the text that I would look for, totally cold, no prep at this at all. Oh yeah, okay, there's a mountain. That tells us some things.
Yeah.
Oh, there's light. That tells us some things. These characters are involved. That brings us all these other webs of things that are being referenced, pulls all that stuff in. And those things are always in like this inner dialogue between all these other things. And there's an assumption that you'll know enough about stories and images and how things were told that you would catch this. So yeah.
Cool. Any other closing remarks?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you guys for joining us for this Bible study, and we'll do some more.
Yep. Subscribe on Substack and YouTube. That's where you find us.
Yeah, we also have on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we have like Twitter and Facebook Reels and all that kind of stuff too. But if you really want to get a hold of us, like,
and get in on the book club. We need more people.
Yeah.
So far, it's going good.
Yeah. Yep. Reach out on Substack, and you'll get my attention a lot faster.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
That's it. Thanks for joining.